I'd like to start by paying homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So there were a few questions about, from different perspectives, about working with the mind. So working with the ups and downs of the mind, the inevitable ups and downs that the mind will go through. And we're now, with the conditions being as they are with COVID, there aren't so many opportunities to distract and to go out and do something and meet somebody. So we're a bit more, we have less distractions, so we're a little bit more up against the moods of the mind. We see them more clearly. And there's also a question about anticipatory grieving, which is also connected with, obviously, with the mind, and also the sense that there's so much suffering in the world, and how to be with that. And there was also a question about communication, which I think I'll leave till the end, because in a way the mind is the forerunner. We need to begin with the mind. So what came as we were sitting there was Buddha so clearly asking us to, or inviting us to, take care of our minds. You know, that the mind is the most important thing, to take care of the mind. And if we take care of the mind, or the heart and mind, then everything else kind of follows. And if we don't take care of our heart and mind, then we struggle and suffer and have a lot of challenges and difficulties internally. So it can be that we have a lot of challenges externally, but if our mind is well and aligned, it's okay. Not that it's always easy, but it's like, there are the resources to meet what's arising. And if we don't take good care of our mind, even when things are okay, then we can be struggling a lot. So it's very important to begin with, I think, even just knowing what is the mood of the mind. And there's this, the mind here and the mind here. What is the mood of the mind? And one thing that I find really helpful is to notice. I mean, I like to do it when I go and sit, but there might be other ways, like when you're going through a particular doorway in your home or something like this, or when you're going to bed or getting up in the morning. It's helpful to have a few different times during the day where you can just check in. What is the mood of the mind right now? What is the mood of the mind right now? So it changes all the time. And yet when the mind is very troubled, that's all we know. It's like there's never been anything else. It's very real and sort of takes over the whole of our experience. And so it can be really helpful just to notice, 4, 5, 6 times in a day. It's certain, find something that you do regularly, or that often happens, like walking through a particular doorway, or going to the bathroom. This happens quite often. Whatever it might be, where you can have that as a reminder to ask yourself, what is the mood of my mind right now? And then you get to see how it's constantly changing. So when we know the changing nature of the mind, we don't have to worry so much about it. Needs to mute. I'm not sure. Somebody's not muted. I'm not sure who that is. So if you're not muted, please mute your computer. So the first thing is just to recognize it's the mind changes all the time, and it's influenced by what we put into it, and it's influenced by how we take care of it. And if our mind is well and centered enough, then almost whatever's happening is manageable. And I think at this time it can be that we almost feel like we shouldn't be okay, we shouldn't feel well, we shouldn't be happy, we shouldn't be feeling a sense of ease and well-being, because there is a lot of suffering in the world, because there is a lot of difficulty and challenge. And there can also be a sense of other people are really struggling, and I should be, then how can I just enjoy being here, or how can I just be okay with my situation as it is? I've heard that from a number of people during the COVID limitations. So there's sort of like almost a sense of guilt to feel okay about one's life. So I think it's very important to recognize that the Buddha was inviting us to take care of our heart and mind. He even used this phrase, which I think I've said before in these teachings, of not shirking the responsibility of cultivating wholesome states. I love that. Not shirking your responsibility or our responsibility to cultivate wholesome states of mind. So it's not just that when things are going our way or things seem okay that we have the wholesome mind states, but it's like it's to be cultivated. It's our responsibility as practitioners to cultivate the wholesome, to generate, to take care of that in our own hearts and minds. So, and that it doesn't mean that we're happy and everything's lovely all the time. There are challenges, and the nature of the mind is to go through different moods. So if you look at the Satipatthana Sutta, the 4 establishments of mindfulness, the Buddha lists all of these different kinds of states of mind. Some that are more expansive, and some that are more contracted, and some that are more wholesome, and some that are more unwholesome. He just kind of lists them all. This is what the mind does. It goes into these places. And then the practice is to know what is present, and then to know what to do with that. So first of all, if we're not aware of what's going on, if we're not aware of the mood of our mind, then it's just influencing us, and we're being kind of pushed around by that. If it's well and in a wholesome state, that's great. We're doing really great things. And if it's burdened, troubled, afraid, worrying, agitated, depressed, these things, then we need to take care of it. Because if we just let it run, then often it goes more and more down in the same direction. So the first thing is to understand that it matters. It matters how we attend to our heart and mind, and then to turn towards, pay attention to what is the mood of the mind right now. I'd actually like to ask you to do that right now. So just to check in. And there's the thinking mind, but there's also the heart mind. What is the mood of the mind right now? And to attend to that with a sense of care, interest, patience, to really take care of our mind. It is the it's what it's like the central thing, you know. It's like even if everything else falls apart, even if we lose our home, even if we get sick, even if we're um, slandered by people, whatever might happen, we're still here with our mind. There's still this body and mind. So this is what we have to take care of. And I remember when I first came to San Francisco, and there was things were a little bit, uncertain, let's say, in the beginning, and there wasn't very much money in the Aloka Foundation, and we were all new, and didn't have the basics down yet, really, in terms of visas and rent and things like that, really. And then I would reflect on, okay, so what if this all falls apart? What's important? If this doesn't work out, or if we actually can't keep the house on because it's too expensive, and if things get difficult, then I would have this, I'd go through in my mind of, maybe could end up on the streets, ending up on the streets of San Francisco is not the best plan in the world, but but it's like, and then what? And it in my mind, it came to the point of, I mean, maybe it was just helpful for me to do this, because everything we have to let go of. Everything that we even that we think of, that we are, we have to let go of. So we've got to let go of all of it anyway. And then in that situation, for me, there was a sense of like, really don't know where this is going, how it's going to work out, whether it's going to work out. And then it's like my mind wanted to go to the worst case scenario, not out of fear, but out of like, well, what if, what if, what would you do if this happened? What would you do if this happened? What would you do if this happened? And I ended up with this perception of, okay, so I'm on the streets. I'm living on the streets of San Francisco, and I'm sick. And not, I just want to be really clear. Sarah and Aloka has always been, have been wonderful stewards and support. So this is no reflection on them. It was just my thinking. I'm on the streets of San Francisco, and I'm sick, and I'm coming to the end of my life. I'm dying on the streets of San Francisco. And what's important? What's important is, where is my mind? What is my mind doing with this? Am I resentful? Am I afraid? Am I um, dwelling in regret? Or is there a sense of like, okay, this is happening now. It's like this. And of course, this is a scenario in my mind. It wasn't actually happening, but it was important to me to take it that far, because we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen in our lives. We don't know how easeful or how difficult our life and our death will be. So there was just this recognition of, as long as I take care of my heart and my mind, even that most difficult scenario is okay. If I can die well, actually everything's okay. So, we're all in the unknown. We're in unknown territory. We don't know how things are going to evolve. We don't know when there's going to be so-called normality again, or if it'll ever, probably never go back to how it was before. And what that means, we don't really know what that means to us. We don't know what it means to our lives. And so we can meet that with fear and worry and clinging and grasping and wanting and not wanting. That's a natural response of the ego. Or we can rise up, as practitioners and see, what am I holding on to? That's anyway, I'm going to have to let go of. I'm going to have to let go of it at some point. And I find that to be very, very helpful, just to see where am I holding on and what would it be like if I had to let it go? Because I will have to let it go. I'm going to have to let it go. I'm going to let all of this go. This body, relationships, place, all of it is all going to go one day. So I don't say that to make you nervous or frightened or anxious or anything like that. So I hope it isn't having that effect, because that's not my intention. But it's more just to align with the reality and to see, where is it that we get snared up, where we're trying to make things certain when they're uncertain. We're trying to make things safe when they're falling apart all the time. So I think it's a useful reflection to practice, just to make some time, just go through those things and see what comes up first. Who is it that you're most attached to? What is most difficult to let go of? And just bring to mind the possibility of letting go of that person, that situation, that place, just one thing at a time. And if it makes you very anxious, then it's probably not such a good thing to be doing. I don't want to. Being more anxious doesn't help. But if it's something that maybe brings you a bit more into a sense of groundedness, it can be a very good practice. And the ups and downs of the mind does go up and down, in and out, back and forth. So again, it's knowing the states of the mind, and then knowing when we need to cultivate. So often, when we're left to our own devices, we just follow old habits, and the old habits of our mind take us to those old familiar places. And the path is something that needs to be cultivated. It needs to have energy put into it, energy and attention and effort within to cultivate. And then, at some point that becomes more the habit, let's say, of mind, or the tendency of mind to align things with the path. But the old habits always, they don't go away easily. So they'll always come and try and pull you off track and drag you over here, drag you over there. So we need to know when we're just following old habits and see what are the results of that, the consequences of that, and is that what we want to do, or do we want to actually put some energy into cultivating something more wholesome, something more beneficial, something that will serve us and others in a more whole way. So it's very helpful that, like, when you notice that you're just going along in an old, the voices in the mind are the same old voices that are, then to recognize that actually this matters, this is important. It actually isn't helpful, it isn't beneficial to just let the mind pull you around in the same old ways, and to recognize, like, what needs to be cultivated. So in the Eightfold Path, right thought or right intention has those three aspects of renunciation, or can be also generosity, and harmlessness, wishing that all beings are free from harm, and goodwill for all beings. So does the mind have those thoughts, or is it about wanting and trying to make things certain, and wanting more, or wanting a high level of comfort, um, or letting the mind get into thoughts of hatred towards people? Is that happening? And if it is, you need to take care of that. It's not going to serve you or anyone else, and it just brings you down, drags you down. And with the media now, there's a lot of opportunity to get afraid and angry and resentful, and yeah, there's a lot of opportunity for unwholesome states to arise. But you don't want to be, bringing that in. That's not what we're here for. We're not here to bring more unwholesome states into the world. We're here as practitioners. We're here to transform that within our own hearts, and then, as best as we can, bring that into the lives of others, bring what's wholesome, beneficial into the lives of others. And it begins with our own heart and mind. That's where it starts. So, it's true that there is a lot of suffering in the world. And if we just let the mind dwell on that, oh, it's all so terrible, there's so much suffering. It's important to let the heart open to it, to know it, to not turn away from it. But it's also important to turn towards it with awareness and with love, and not with the kind of empathy that pulls us in, because then we just add to the suffering of the world. We're not alleviating it in any way. We're adding to it. Even if our life circumstances are okay, we're adding to the suffering. It doesn't help. It's definitely not the way the Buddha pointed. So not shirking our responsibility, cultivating wholesome states, and seeing how can we do that. And we might feel like we're sort of snowed under with lots of stuff that's lots of unwholesome states, lots of fear and anger and aversion, all of that, and kind of don't even know how to begin, finding that sense of lightness or love. And but it begins here. It begins in the heart. So that's where we need to go, away from this, all the stories and the worries and the problems, and down to the heart. And then to remember that there have been times, even if you can't quite touch it right now, there have been times when the heart has been loving, open, warm. And so to go back and see, can you find even just a tiny little speck of that, tiny little glimmer of that in your heart? And if you can, to nurture that and take care of it, the little light in your heart, because that's what the world needs. It needs the awareness, the clarity, the love, the transformation that can happen through our practice. It's not, even though it might feel like the right thing to suffer with everyone, it doesn't really help. But to bring a bit more love, a bit more light, a bit more clarity, a bit more awareness, that helps. Helps you, and it helps everyone. Helps the balance. Helps redress the balance in the world. So anyway, we all have to. Well, not we don't have to, but it's an invitation to cultivate that, to be part of that transformation. And then, I think now at this time there's so much available. There's so many resources now available. Meditation, people to meditate with, and Dharma teachings and trainings, and inspiring music and whatever it is. There's a lot out there. So to know, to be careful what you put into your system. So it's important to know. I mean, I think it's important to have some knowledge of what's going on in the world. The news is something to take in a discerning way. It's just one angle on things, and it leaves out a lot of the good that is happening, because there is a lot of good happening. So be discerning, like when you watch the news, how often you watch the news, why you watch the news. Don't just flick it on and before you go to bed have another little look. That drags us down. But maybe like once a day, look at the headlines, or once a day watch the whole thing, whichever it is, or less often if you want to. But I wouldn't do it more often than that, because then you're overloaded with often quite negative information. And anticipating grieving. Anticipating grieving. I mean, in a way, whatever I was saying in the beginning, we're going to have to let go of everything. So, and many people are faced with quite difficult decisions at this time, whether to let go of, to let go of an office because it's not being used. And there's many situations where we have to make difficult, big decisions. And in some ways, we can make the decision, and in some ways the decision is made. So it's partly just can we be okay with things like this, or things as they are, or with things changing from how they are. Can we be okay with it? So, I really appreciate that the Buddha gave us the tools to meet conditions, however those conditions may be. And he wasn't saying it has to be like this in order for you to be happy. It has to be like this in order for you to awaken. It was like, yeah, samsara. It's all there. There's the wonderful, the glorious, the comfortable, the delicious, the painful, the terrible, the brutal, the kind. It's all in there. It's all here. It's all part of the world. And it's in this world, in this deeply unsatisfactory world, that we're invited to wake up. Yeah, there's that phrase which I've sometimes misquoted, I have to admit. So I should quote it now correctly. When the Buddha says, when the world is on fire with aging, sickness, and death. So it's actually a conversation between a Deva and the Buddha. And the Deva says, when the world is on fire with aging, sickness, and death, we should do good and benefit beings. And then the Buddha says, when the world is on fire with aging, sickness, and death, give up the bait of the world. Give up the bait of the world. So I think the Deva is pointing, like the Deva's response is beautiful, and I think that's a way of very very good way of living. and that's and then but it's kind of in a way it's pointing to like that. Well, that leads to a good rebirth, a beautiful rebirth. And then the Buddha's saying, rebirth is rebirth. Let go of the bait. So I'd like to leave that in a way with you to explore, what does that mean to you? What is the bait of the world for you? That's that promise that it's all going to be good. That's something that feels like, yeah, it's really worth holding on to. I want more of that. So that's something for you to explore in your own lives and your own practice. And I'm still exploring. It's something that, in a way, it's kind of a living question. What is the bait of the world? And there was also the question about communication, active listening, and ways to communicate. So, I mentioned that two of our sisters are doing this training at the moment, and they are quite brilliant in the way that they're using communication. And I can't even begin to know everything they're doing. So I'm very interested to learn more. But what is clear is that if you listen in the right way, if you listen in a way that's really listening, and if there's congruence with, if the listener is staying congruent to what is being said, and like can ask questions or want or seek completion in statements or communications that are not clear, then we save ourselves a lot of complication. But I'm not really able to teach much about how that happens because I'm still kind of observing it, really. But one of the things that I found, I'm not really usually into these acronyms. I don't usually like them, but there's this one acronym I think is very brilliant, and it's around speech, and it's WAIT, WAIT. Why am I talking? Why am I talking? It's a great one. Having just been sitting here talking all this time too, sorry about that. But it's such a great thing. It's like, why am I talking? So before one even opens one's mouth, you think, why am I talking? What's the motivation? What do I want to say? What's important? And that, I find often the answer is like, I don't need to. I can just listen right now. So now I'm just going to give you that little practice around speech. Why am I talking? It really supports at least the beginnings of good listening, and it, for me, it also this practice around speech. I noticed how quite often, like that, I'm not really, that I wouldn't be really aware of my mind state. And there were a few occasions quite early in the morning where my mind was quite grumbly. I didn't think of myself as a grumbly kind of person, but I noticed because I wasn't saying what I wanted to say, I was just practicing restraint around speech. Oh, the mind is grumbling away. It's grumbling away about something. It's grumbling away about somebody. It's got this little story going on and grumble about this person. They always do that and that again. And I wasn't aware of it until I had that clear, like, wait. And so in a way, it's very, very helpful to. It's like it brings us back. If we're clear about our speech, if we're careful around our speech, and we don't just say what we think when we feel like it, and we practice that. Why am I talking? Wait. We practice that, then we start to see. I do anyway. It's like it doesn't get an easy outlet, and then or what's the motivation here? And then what mind state is it coming from, actually? And then when we know that, then we can take care of the mind state, and we can save a lot of trouble by not saying the thing that we were going to say, and transforming the heart and mind, and then being more clear about why we're speaking. And I think that naturally leads to less interrupting and less needing to get one's point across and this kind of thing. So I'd like to end there, and I'm going to turn the recording off, and I'd like to open up for any questions or comments.